Hey there, Pinpoint Players. Tim here with the Pinpoint Player Podcast. I'm joined tonight with my buddy Rambo.
What's going on, everyone?
And today, we wanted to mention to the Pinpoint Players that after our last episode, Rambo and I got to talking. And honest to God, it's been 8 years since GTA 5 was released. And how can a company who produces games sustain the revenue between those 8 years? Sure, I mean, they've released games in between, but ladies and gentlemen, the answer to that is microtransactions.
And that is the unfortunate byproduct of where we are today with a lot of gaming. Instead, a lot of developers, both big and small, but most of them bigger, are realizing that they don't necessarily have to pump out a new game every 3, 4, 5 years. They can just rely on in-game microtransactions. And on the one hand, it can lengthen the life cycle of a game a little bit longer, so that way players can get a little bit more enjoyment out of it. But on the other hand, I sincerely believe it stifles innovation, point blank. I mean, you've got a game like GTA 5. I mean, going back a second, GTA 4 had two major single party expansions. You had The Ballad of Gay Tony and The Lost and the Damned. And it gave, I think, 10 plus hours to new gameplay, new story elements. And we've had nothing like that in GTA 5.
No, I mean, there have been several events that GTA 5 has held in their own in-game universe, but like you were saying, in between those games, we got an expanded story for Liberty City, and in all honesty, GTA 3 is where I jumped in with the GTA series.
Same here.
I have a nostalgic connection to Liberty City. I absolutely loved seeing an updated version of the city, new characters, new story, but same setting. It was a trip back home, kind of, and with that, within the need at that time to create games like that, we were introduced to something more creative in a storytelling sense. GTA 5 certainly has taken advantage of microtransactions, but I mean, we're all familiar with microtransactions in a sense. Mobile gaming is the predominant, I don't want to say influencer because I don't want to associate it with today's pop culture and the influencer's sense because
But you could definitely say that it was a big driving force behind its mainstream acceptance. I mean, it started in earnest on, I think, PC gaming, and I think even long before that
yeah,
on other
actually,
platforms entirely. But I can say that I feel like it really exploded on mobile gaming first, and then when I think a lot of publishers saw how big it was there, they figured maybe they can get a little bit of the slice of the pie on consoles and PC gaming. And again, that's kind of where we sit today.
yeah, I agree. I do want to say exploited because it's not in my opinion it's not a good thing that's happening. With storytelling as important in society as I believe it needs to be, when we are able to override storytelling for a financial sense, especially through a storytelling medium such as video games, it's stripping down the medium to a financial. It's a money, you know.
It's easy money. It's easy money. It's almost kind of cheap money because I mean, so take GTA 5. Now, for the record, Tim and I have played GTA 5 a lot in the past. We don't as much anymore for many reasons, but we did a lot in the past, and we enjoyed it. Even if it was full microtransactions, we would just get our own lobby, play our own games, play the missions, and have a good time. And we'd kind of grind the in-game money out and buy ourselves every now and some of the nice things. But honestly, I would never go buying one of those shark cards because it's a lot of money. It's a waste of money, I personally think. Even if it's gets you fun, planes or cars or whatever, it's just a waste of money. And I remember just real quick, Andrew and I got a lot of in-game items that we bought on the store because there was a money glitch that happened back in I
Oh
think
my God, you
2015.
guys told me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something crazy. Our friend Andrew got,
Shout out to Andrew.
yeah, shout out. He got $1 billion of in-game money through some weird glitch where somebody put $1 billion bounty on me. He killed me.
Oh
He
my
got a
God.
$1 billion, and something similar happened with me. But for me, I just got deposited $30 million in there, and he got crazy amount of money. I got somewhat crazy amount of money, but it was enough for us to basically go buy everything before Rockstar took the money back, and we got all those in-game items. And but I never would have paid for that with my own hard-earned money. Never.
Oh, and I don't blame you. The illusion of it back then, sure, it was a little bit fun, but you also we were also going through something that I don't think a lot of pinpoint players really understand, and that's grinding.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's if you're grinding by yourself and just playing the same mission to try and get a lot of money, it get very boring. And honestly, if we were playing it by ourselves, I probably would not have done that myself. I wouldn't have played the same mission over and over again just to get like a Harrier jet. But because the four of us were playing and doing a bunch of shenanigans during the mission to see stuff like, hey, there's a mission where we have to go steal a Titan, fly it up north. Let's take the most ridiculous vehicles there. Let's try and do it where we only kill everybody with the cars, and let's see if we can land a plane coming down at like an 85-degree angle and see if we can get away with it. It's
Right.
just, in other words, crazy stuff during the missions that would make it fun and liven it up. But if we had to do it by ourselves, I wouldn't have bothered personally with
Yeah.
the grinding.
But it I can understand that sense, but there really is a value to grinding that I don't think a lot of pinpoint players are taking home. The value in which you build up your skill in playing the game, developing it. I'm really curious if the pinpoint players are aware of unlockables. Unlockables were a thing in game that you had to play games a specific way in order to unlock them. And a great way that unlockables was demonstrated was in as early as I remember GoldenEye. I love talking about that game. It's one of my favorite games. The unlockables in GoldenEye were something to really strive for. You could play the mission and you could do it fun and get through it and just complete the mission, but you could take different approaches to the mission, like trying to beat the damn mission in under 60 seconds. That gave you
Oh yeah, there was something like that. If you could rush through the entire level and beat it under a certain amount of time, I'm not sure if it was 60, but if you could just run through all the way to
yeah,
the end, you
you didn't
get.
have to shoot anybody, you just ran the mission.
Yeah, if you could do that, I think the game would allow you this like cheat in-game cheat where you get something like DK mode where it's you make everybody's head big. It made it look silly. There's another one where if you beat the mission when you did it under a certain time or some other constraint, you would get the golden gun. I remember one specifically because we're talking about unlockables. It was the second mission. It was the facility level. If you could beat the mission on Double O Agent in under 2 minutes and 15 seconds, I still remember it after all these years because I could never do it. I got close so many times, but I could never do it. You would get invincibility mode. And it's like, yes, it makes the game, in that sense, like, yes, you can go through the game without a challenge, but it's kind of fun every now and then to go explore levels without the fear of, like, getting killed. You just, every now and then, you do want to explore levels and just kind of just do stuff for shits and giggles.
But that's the thing. That was fun to do when we were younger. That was, you ran through the mission and you were 2 minutes, 13 seconds, and then some guy comes up, pops you in the back of the head. You slit. I mean, how many times has this happened to you? Where that you were at the end of the mission and the boss was there and you had low health, but you knew you could do it because you've done it before. You were close before. As soon as the cutscene stops, you jump into action. You do a spin, you do a roll, and all of a sudden, you slapped in the face. Just a guy comes up to you, slaps you in the face. You lose all your coin. You
And your
lose all
run
your
goes to hell. Everything,
yeah.
everything you work for goes to hell. And there are times, like I said, the closest I ever got, and I vaguely remember this. I think it was 219, so close, and it was very specific because a guy you had to talk to in the mission had to be in a specific place, and you had like a 1 in 5 chance of him being in that specific place, so that you can complete the mission in that time. And I could never get it. So for those of you listening to this that were able to do it, props to you because I could never do it.
But getting there, dude, there was a chance. I mean, you put your best foot forward, and you just kept grinding over and over and over. That's that. I don't think that they're getting it nowadays.
Same thing with Super Smash Brothers.
Oh yeah, that's true,
Like
dude.
even going back,
Unlocking
even
Mewtwo
even
in
going back
Super.
to the original N64 one.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, Falco. Oh, I remember trying to unlock Luigi and not knowing exactly how to do it. I knew that you could play Luigi. I got Ness. I got Falco. Falco, all you had to do was complete the story mode once with not Captain Falcon, a Fox. Yeah, and then you got Falco. Kirby, no, well, not Kirby. Ness. I forget how you got Ness.
Ness was very specific. I don't remember how you get Ness because Ness was one of the extra four that you had to do some special thing to get. I can't
Yeah.
remember though.
But Luigi, I remember trying to get Luigi. That was the tough one to get. It was I forget exactly how you needed to do it. I think it was you needed to finish the first, I think you needed to finish the first story in under a certain time or a certain number of deaths. I remember there was I remember in Brawl, to unlock there was a couple of different ways to unlock Luigi in Super Smash Brothers Brawl. You could either just cross the finish line at point
Oh,
two.
yes, I remember that. One of them was you could if it was I think it was in Melee, but
It
one of them,
was no, you're right. It was melee.
it was Melee. I remember now. You had to finish the time to finish the mission. You had to do it with 1-2 on the clock.
One, yes,
That
yeah,
was
one
it.
and two.
Otherwise, you wouldn't get the chance to do it. And yeah, stuff like
Oh, that's true, dude. It was a chance because once you unlocked them, you had to defeat them in battle.
yes. And if you didn't defeat him in battle, then
You lost the chance. You had to do it all over again.
exactly. But yeah, that's what we mean, unlockables, stuff like that.
That's the kind of stuff that we grew up with when we were playing games. You know, a great analogy when microtransactions actually came under a lot of criticism between the late 2000s and the early 2010s was a meme, a very popular meme at the time where they served you a burger, and the burger had the onions and the ketchup and the mustard, the lettuce, the tomato, the cheese, the grilled buns, and the meat. Oh, delicious! It's a scrumptious burger. But then microtransaction became a part, and you got this plain burger. That's your base game with the buns, but you could pay $15 and you'd get those onions, and then you'd get that tomato.
Yeah,
You
all that
know,
other stuff. I saw the same version of that meme, but it was like the Mona Lisa painting, where in the old days, in the 90s and early 2000s, it was you get the base game is the Mona Lisa, and then your expansion is another great work of Da Vinci's. But then today, you're getting a part of that Mona Lisa, and your expansions are basically getting the other pieces back, so that way you can have the full experience.
so where do we see this going? Honestly, I don't see it going in a lot of great places. Did a little bit of research into microtransactions earlier this morning, and I discovered that this isn't actually a new concept when it comes to gaming. According to microtransactions Wikipedia, as early as 1990 in South Korean arcade games, players were given the option to improve their players' stats, their health, their weapons, their tools by adding more money to the game through quarters. You could pop in 50 cents and you'd get 150 health as opposed to 100 health. So all you needed to do was add more money to the game. And this was incorporated through arcade games. So, I mean, the concept came through earlier than we think. When we say microtransactions, like I said earlier, I think that we just immediately assume places like Farmville.
Exactly, places like Farmville or something that started in the late 2000s.
Yeah.
My first one that I can really truly remember was Battlefield 3. It didn't have him at first. You play the game, you level up your character in multiplayer to get all the other upgrades, unlockables, things of that sort. But then maybe about a year after the game came out, then they did an update that introduced all these microtransactions where instead of taking whatever amount of hours it takes to completely unlock the assault or sniper class, you could pay, I don't know, $10 and have it completely unlocked from the get-go. And it's like, well, that again, as we kind of alluded to this point, it's kind of cheapening the game if you can just pay for all of this now. And not only is it cheapening the game, but you have, I feel like the developers are kind of double dipping. They're getting you to pay for something that you should be playing the game anyway to earn, because that's the point of playing the game.
Right. So Battlefield 3, that's a console game. Was it available for PC as well?
Yes, no, it was available for Xbox. It was both consoles, Xbox, PS3 at the time, and then yeah, the PC.
So that expansion, was that done through an in-store purchase? Did you have to go through Xbox Live?
No, no, nothing like that. It was the in-game. It was the in-game store. Like you connect. I mean, you
So
pay.
the game had a store with it.
Yeah, but you pay. But you pay through the. You pay using your Xbox, marketplace
Right.
or your PlayStation Store money, and
Which you have to with money, actual money. You buy those credits through actual money, and then you buy something through the game store with those credits that you purchased.
right. The point was you're using your own money to pay for this. That's what we can definitely say in earnest. The one thing I do want to add is from a I'm not completely oblivious to the money it brings in. I can understand from a business standpoint that this does bring in extra money and extends the game's life cycle, but it's always a balancing act. I feel like you can live in both worlds, but do feel like there has to be a better balance of microtransactions against a $60 base game. Now, if you're talking about a free to play game, yes, you do need your revenue lives off selling cosmetics and these in-game upgrades. And while I'm not a fan of those games, I almost avoid those games like the plague generally. I understand that from a business standpoint, but I feel like it's dishonest to do it from a $60 base game. And I get it. If you want recurring revenue, I would say to not have it be your sole means of money after the game is released. I just wish there'd be a return to more of those real, honest expansions that GTA or some of the PC games from the 2000s used to have. I mean, yes, these single player expansions for a lot of games still do exist, but I feel like the frequency is less often because a lot of these AAA developers realize that there's more money to be made from people paying $1 to $2 for something cosmetic or a little gun upgrade versus an expansion that took maybe hundreds of hours for the developers to make. So, again, I understand from the business standpoint, but I hate it from the gamer nostalgic standpoint.
Oh, I agree. Going back to a little bit of the in-store purchase, Battlefield 3, those in-game purchases were reported to be between 3 and 6% of games' general revenue.
It's a small amount, but it's not completely insignificant, especially if you're trying to.
Well, between 2010 and 2015.
Oh God, so it gets worse, doesn't it?
So, I mean, if we were to do a rough inflation adjustment, it would be between like I think it was $300 million. So the games that had in-game purchases made roughly $300 million in just in-game purchases.
Easy. That's easy money for developers because, again, you're not hiring voice actors for your single player expansion. You're not developing new environments. You're just taking the existing base game or base multiplayer and you're just adding on a few extra bells and whistles.
Which we grew up with those bells and whistles in the game. You were talking about expansion packs earlier for CD, not CD, but
Well, yeah,
C,
CD-ROM games.
yeah, CD-ROM games. Those, I think, were actually a pretty interesting solution, expanding the content in a video game, because it was, sort of an in-game, not in, it was sort of an expansion to the game, but it was, cosmetic. And I feel like that's more of an okay sense because you're not trapping a player into a pay to play scenario. You're saying, "Oh, we've developed this fun content." For example, the most immediate example that comes to mind is The Sims. They had The Sims Pets, which just allowed you to download pets into the game.
Right. But I feel like in those senses it was better because you have a fantastic base game that has hundreds of hours of gameplay and the developers realize that people love this game, so let's add a little bit more fun for them. And they did just that. And it's the same thing going all the way back to the 90s with, I would say, it's similar to even games going all the way back to Doom, where you had your base game. I think the first, so I think Doom was split up into four parts, and I think the first part was distributed for free during shareware to get you to buy the rest of the game. And I think after a little while, they released a fourth level or a fourth part in the game that you can get by maybe paying an extra money. Now, I don't remember that entirely for certain because we're well after the Doom era, but other role-playing games did that in the 90s, and I honest to God can't think of any. And I honest to God can't think of any at the top of my head, but I know that that was the norm back then. You pay for this base game that was $50 on PC, and then you pay maybe $20 for a nice big expansion that adds. So if your base game was say 30 hours of gameplay, maybe this expansion would add another 15 to 20 hours. Fantastic value in that sense for more gameplay.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of bringing it back around to where we started. That was all done because of the love of the game to create something wonderful to share that people enjoy experiencing. They go through the game, they play it, they want to play more. And those developers came up with more ideas. They came up with different strategies or missions to accomplish. They cultivated more creative energy, and they imagined a possibility that they created and crafted themselves. But nowadays, I mean, let's take an example of a game that I truly despise, Fortnite, where you're sent into a very simplified mission. You're just dropped into a battle royale. Your characters have a backstory, and, they don't really expand upon that from what I understand about the game.
Well, yeah, they just drop you in, and you're one of 100, and using your skills, kill everybody else to win. And so it's definitely a game where you go in, you can play it for as much or as little as you want, but it definitely purely relies on these microtransactions, cosmetic stuff, because it knows that that is the base game. The best thing they could do is add more levels where they drop you in, but short of that, they make their money from microtransactions because that's it. They're a free to play game, and in that
So
sense,
it's free to play.
it's kind of a one dimensional product. It's one type of game. It drops you in, and that's that, and you're done basically. And I know it's not the only battle royale game in that sense, but that's all it is. I mean, PUBG kind of does the same thing, to be fair. So I don't want to excuse that either, but since PUBG is not as well known as Fortnite at this point, I've played the two. I prefer PUBG, but I'm not about to go spend hard-earned money on PUBG cosmetics. I just go in, drop in, and play the game, and I'm kind of done. And I've had my fun. I'm out basically. But Fortnite, again, it's a one-dimensional game, but it tries to hype itself up as something more than that with its advertising. But it's really not when you go down to the bone.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I wanted to get to the heart about Fortnite. It hypes it up based off of its advertising, but it itself is nothing more than an advertisement. You're there for the experience of what's around. What is around in Fortnite? Is it like 5 minutes to kill?
I mean, I would say I don't think it's 5 minutes. I mean, it depends how long you last, but let's say you're good
Okay,
and you can
so
make it all the way toward the end. I'm going to say in the ballpark of
10 minutes,
no. I would say I would say between
20.
20 and 30 minutes.
Okay, so around half an hour. So it gives you half an hour worth of experience, but then it gives you your stats, and it's like, oh, you fired so many shots and you killed so many people, and then I'm assuming it just creates a flash where it says, oh, look at all these new things that are shiny and new and neat. All these rewards that you just earned, you could spend it on this. It's worth this and this. It's worth and that and that. You have enough to buy it, and it's just doing that. The load time, I'm sure, is quick and simple and easy, but then afterwards you're immediately put into this tense position where it's like, the next round's in a couple of minutes. Do you want to upgrade? Your gun's kind of weak. You're running out of bullets. Here, you've got 10 stars.
Or do you want a nice pink fluorescent lavender color gun? Well, you
Yeah.
can get it now, but you have to act now if you get it now. Disclaimer: it's been a long time since I've played Fortnite, so I don't know how it is in that sense. But I like to think that there is a lot of flashy images to show you that, like, you want this, it's only this amount of money, or you could play the game, or you can go into the next round. It's up to you. I want to say it's kind of like, and here's a somewhat analogy I like to compare it to. It's a bit like those slot machines at casinos for a lot of older people. See, because old people, I'm talking boomer generation and older, aren't used to those kind of flashy images that you and I are used to from playing video games as kids. They are kind of overstimulated from the slot machines, and so therefore they'll want to put money in to a crazy amount, hoping that they win it back. So they'll put in $1 and win back 50 cents, but they'll be excited by even winning the 50 cents. They'll keep going back because of all the flashy lights and just everything going on. They're overstimulated, and I know that's a basic layman's term of psychology, but because of us growing up with video games, I feel like slot machines for us are not going to do that to us when we're old folks, because we grew up with those flashy images. Now, I feel like a lot of game developers and publishers have kind of caught on to the idea of that slot machines for older folks, and they realize that to overstimulate us, to make us buy stuff, they have the equivalent for us is flashing all these, like, quick sales of different things in game, whether you're on
Yeah,
mobile
impulse
or
buy.
exactly impulse buying. That's the thing. That's how they suck us in, because what would have worked for our parents and grandparents, they have to up the game, and impulse buying where you have limited time offers, that gets you,
Oh yeah.
just like it did for the
Yeah.
old folks.
Really glad that you brought up gambling because there are some regulations that are on, in consideration to limit the number of microtransactions in games due to the fact that you're selling games to kids and based off of, I believe it was the UK's term of digital media content, they deemed that loot crates were actually a form of gambling and were pretty much illegal to do for children because loot crates didn't guarantee their worth.
Right,
Uh,
right. It's a bit like, yeah, no, you pay $10 for a loot crate and you
and
hope
you'd
for,
get 5 cents worth of items.
yes, and it's
So
just
you have
like,
to buy another one.
right, and you keep going, 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 and going, hoping that,
And then you get the jackpot with all those bells and whistles.
yes, and it only cost you $200 to get to that point for something that was worth like $20.
Without the incentive to buy it again, there wouldn't be a need to purchase more than one. If you got the loot crate because you needed that item and the only way to get that item is through purchasing a loot crate, the game, the regulation states that the game cannot withhold material material within the game that needs to happen in order to advance. If you need an item to advance, and the only way to get that item is to purchase it through a random lottery, that's gambling.
Oh, totally. I
But
agree 100%.
if the game says, "Oh, the only way to play this game is to get this item, and to get this item, you need to pay $2.99 for an in-store credit, so that you can buy it with the in-store credit," that's a microtransaction, and that's an in-game purchase. So that's fine, as opposed to an in-game lottery. But the contention that I still have with those regulations is that you're still using real money in-game purchases. Fun fact, a little statistics: free-to-play games are the most popular types of apps.
Makes sense because
They're free.
exactly. People love free. Doesn't matter where you live in the world, everybody loves the four-letter word free.
But how do those companies maintain their ability to sell the game for free? Through in-game purchases. Apple and Google have reported that 39% of their in-store apps purchases are free-to-play games. Their revenue from those games are $4 billion.
Lots of money on the table, lots of money to be made.
Yeah, and the money that they make is in these peer pressure kind of scenarios. There was a point in Farmville when you planted your crops, you had to wait a certain amount of time. But the game noticed, oh, they haven't been on in a while. They registered the fact that the app hasn't been opened, you haven't interacted with the app. So Google and Apple, they go, send them a notification, tell them they have 10 seconds. They want their crops now, they have to pay $3.99.
That's irritating. If I download an app or a game and it sends me messages like that, I uninstall it immediately. I don't need that stuff. Screw that.
So, with that all said and done, and all of that in mind, how would we feel as the Pinpoint Player community if games became that overall? And I mean console games, I mean PC games, I mean mobile games, all forms of games. In the next 5 to 10 years, it's predicted that all forms of gaming will be a free to play type of game where we can just download the game, but then be constantly advertised to. In order to keep those games afloat, we'd need to get involved with microtransactions as a part of playing the game.
Good God, I hope that's not going to happen in any form, but I really hope that doesn't happen at all because just for the sheer fact that I don't like that type of industry where to get those cheap thrills, you're being nickeled and dimed. And yes, it is a nickel here, a dime there, but those add up. And I don't like the idea of that future. And I certainly hope that doesn't happen because there is a fundamental experience to being able to play a fun single player game or to play an entirely complete game with an expansion on top of it. And look, opposed to the idea of some of these AAA games having a couple microtransactions. Like, you want to buy your character a silly jacket or something, it's like fine, but if you make your entire game full of this garbage where you only have maybe 3 or 4 defaults and like 100, paid options for like a jacket or a hat or something, then that's kind of, crappy, because you're already paying $60 to $70 for the base game, and you're asking players to pay a little bit more of their hard-earned money to kind of have that kooky, fun experience. And as you'd expect, having talked about this with you for the past whatever amount of time, I'm not a fan of that, and I hope that it doesn't come to that in all forms of media. It's like, look, free-to-play games on mobile apps like that Farmville crap, and if people really want to pay for that or play for that, I can't stop them. More power to them if they really want to do that. As adults, the last thing I really want to cover is I don't like it when it's kids being, at the end of this, because you and I have this relationship with money where it took us, our entire lives to get to this point to realize, like, yes, we can spend some of our money on these video games, go have fun, but, we taper it back to make sure that we don't spend too much money on gaming at a time, because, you and I have obligations, you and I have expenses that we need to pay, just like any regular adult. Now with kids, they don't have that obligation when they're living at home, when they're, between the ages of 5 and, 18 years old, and they're starting to play some sort of gaming. So if you teach them this bad relationship with money when they're young, this bad habit develops and becomes, if it's a little here, a little there, and it's very infrequent, fine, be that as it may. But when you constantly do those little there, little here, over a long period of time, constantly, well then all of a sudden you've spent a couple $100s on this game that you might just not even play ever again, because there's going to be a new game next year and that's going to be the hot thing. Look, Fortnite's the big thing now. And for those folks that have spent hundreds of dollars on Fortnite skins, guns, or whatever, another game will come out in the future and it'll be the new kid on the block. Will it be wise to have spent all that money on that game that's only going to bring you a limited amount of joy?
I don't think it will.
Neither do I. So now you could argue that for a $60 base game, it's true. But on the other hand, that $60 base game, if you know what you're paying, if you know what you're getting into it for those $60, I don't find it as bad, because you're paying the $60 flat for maybe a good single player narrative, for a good multiplayer that you could play for hours and hours and hours. Like, think like the good old Call of Duty games, the Call of Duty 4 campaign that was, I think, between 7 and 10 hours, with multiplayer that could be, you can play it as much or as little as you want for that base price. Where am I going with this? I'm saying simply that adults generally have this relationship with money where they understand that they can spend their money on it, but it's just at a game, and they try not to get sucked into it as much. Whereas kids haven't developed that yet for the most part. And so it's unfair of them to know that when they play these games. And a lot of developers definitely take advantage of that, take advantage of those kids.
Yeah, it's exploitive. It's exploitation. Um, I agree. I mean, when we were able to pay a base flat rate of $60 for a game, we got most of the game's content. And then as we progressed, it became downloadable content, and we were able to, pay a small fee, download it, incorporate it into the game. But what really upsets me about, the progression of that is that people really just became sort of entitled in a sense. I mean, they could start the game, have the most powerful weapon, the most powerful shield, the most powerful form of travel, and they're going through the tutorial and they're like, hit A to knock the barrel down, and you hit A and like lightning strikes and destroys the entire city. And they're like, try again.
But have fun and keep spending money on it. And that's stuff like that cheapens the game, because you pay $60 for a full-fledged product where it's like, yes, the game's tough at first because you're starting out, but that's the point. You play for the whole experience through and through. So if you're shortcutting it from the beginning, it's like, why did you spend the $60 to spend extra money on it to do all that? Like, why did you spend maybe over $100 to have a very kind of cheapened experience of the game? Because that's the point of the game, was for her to have trials and tribulations. That's why you bought it. I mean, if you wanted to have an easy time, I would have said maybe go play something else where you're godlike from the beginning.
It's funny that you say that because if we really look at the model of how things are now and where it's going, and we look back at the model of gaming that we had before, we really did get more content for less value. Because sure, these games now are free to play, but you have to buy all the things that you would download for free or unlock for free. But we were just paying a flat rate too. I mean, I think GoldenEye was like $50.
Yeah,
It was like $50 because the standard was around 50 for games around that time.
I seem to remember even a couple back then being 60, but yeah,
Yeah,
we'll say 50 to 60 was standard. But
50 to
I get your idea. So yeah,
yeah. You got a story. You got to this elaborate movie that you were involved with. You were the main character. You had to accomplish objectives, complete goals, succeed. You got to play the story mode of the game.
an enhanced version of it because you had all these extra little tidbits to go with it. It was like exactly like you said. It was like playing the movie, but like an expanded version of the movie.
Right. And then you had multiplayer mode or online mode where you had just a kind of the Fortnite of the time. It's just a free for all. You were there, you had to shoot all your friends, you had to play capture the flag or capture the base. But there was something different about the game. Like in Call of Duty, you had World of War. You had your main campaign, but then you had the zombie mode with your friends.
And it was awesome. You felt like you were getting a full product and then some. You were getting your single player, your multiplayer, and your zombies all wrapped in a $60 purchase, and it felt like you were getting a steal.
I know that we put a lot of questions out there for you, but I feel like we're not going to leave you hanging on this one because there is a way to prevent this type of thing from occurring in the future. And it's really to not support those types of games, as difficult as it is. The model of video gaming is projected to become 100% free to play, but pay to play within the next 5 to 10 years if the trends continue to go the way that they are now. This very upwards trend with games like Fortnite. But if we don't support them, we have to revert back to another system. And it's not a system that, you know, we can change. We can develop a new system, but there's a perfectly good system of gaming that was used before. And it's those one-time flat rate purchases where you get all the content. The unlockables, the golden eyes of the world, where you had your story, you had your multiplayer, and you had your unlockables that were a part of the game from the get-go.
So I would say to those folks listening to this, definitely go support those single player experiences, those kind of full fledged experiences that are out now. Go support those developers. And look, if you really want to play those free to play games like Fortnite or stuff on mobile or other games I'm forgetting or definitely can't list them all in this time, I would say just be aware of the money you spend. Just track it. Just have a mental picture of what you're spending. And look, if it's telling you that you can keep playing this game, but you have to pay this little extra money, say screw it. Go play something else and come back to it later when the time's passed. Because that's the other thing. We're in a large golden age of video games. There are so many things to play on so many different platforms. It's a wonderful time for gaming in that sense that there's so many choices. So I would say just go play something else because I guarantee you there are many other fun products to play out there.
Absolutely.
Plenty of things to do to say screw the freemium stuff.
Well, yeah, and if you have children out there who have mobile phones and access to Google Play or Apple, App Store, make sure that you at least have software installed on that phone or tablet that your child uses to prevent them from accidentally stumbling upon microtransactions. There are regulations being considered at the moment. None have been really fully fledged to protect children and accidental purchases within in-app, in-game, in-app purchases. But there are wonderful softwares out there that do help you protect your kids from spending money that they don't have. Want to thank you guys for tuning in to our third episode about microtransactions. This is the Pinpoint Player Podcast.
If you liked our content, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It greatly helps us with outreach. And same thing with Spotify. Give us a follow on there. Also helps us with outreach there. And you can reach us at Pinpoint Players on Instagram if you want to send us a DM.
You can also email us, pinpointplayers@gmail.com, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. We'd love to hear from you. We're also on YouTube. We have some great content on there. We're looking to expand into more prosperous ventures. So follow our channel, leave us a comment, like, subscribe, let us know. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. Take it easy, Pinpoint players.
Until next time, guys.